There we go. Eh? There we go. Eh? Why is that not clear at all? There we go. There we go. Eh? Alright. Let's get into it here. I usually don't have streams this early, but guess what? We're doing it. Just bear with me here. I gotta suck back some bean water. Alright. Alright, so fuck Joe Biden, right? So Elon Musk hits Joe Biden hard after State of the Union. I don't know if you guys seen it last night. I watched the whole thing. Well, damn near close to it. It sounds really good what he's saying, but he's not going to do any of it. And I found it funny because he's talking about energy expansion, yet he's cutting fucking pipelines down. Like what in the actual fuck? But Tesla and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk blasted President Joe Biden following his State of the Union address. Nothing his decision to ignore Tesla in favor of Ford and GM's new electric vehicle ventures. I don't like the idea of it because it just seems like a bad idea because the closer we get to complete electronic vehicles, the further we will be from determining our own destiny. And what I mean by that is microchips and all the crap you need to make these vehicles. Like we thought we had a problem making vehicles now. And we're slaves to China because of these stupid microchips. Imagine if the entire car is electric. There's no way. Unless we start making our own microchips, we're screwed. Like we thought we had a problem making vehicles now. And we're slaves to China because of these stupid microchips. Imagine if the entire car is electric. There's no way. Unless we start making our own microchips, we're screwed. We thought we had a problem. I just wanted to check the volume, see if the volume was okay. Even though I got this mic, it still doesn't sound like other people's, and I got all the same equipment, so I don't really get it, but anyway, let's see what bumbling Biden. So according to Biden, who doesn't even write his own tweets, I guarantee it, Ford is investing $11 billion to electric vehicles, creating 11,000 jobs across the country. GM is making largest investment in its history, $7 billion to electric vehicles, creating 4,000 jobs in Michigan. Tesla has created over 50,000 U.S. jobs building electric vehicles and investing more than double GM and Ford combined. For your information, to person controlling this Twitter. Yeah, I know, that's what I just said. That's funny. During his speech on Tuesday evening, President Biden nodded to Ford and its manufacturing in the United States. While the White House has frequently lauded the efforts of Ford and GM, Tesla, the world's largest electric vehicle manufacturer, has often been omitted. The snubbing may lie in the fact that Tesla is not unionized, as White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki hinted last year when she was asked why Tesla was not invited to an electric vehicle summit in which Ford and GM participated. That is strange, isn't it? If they're not unionized, I suppose we can pin that as the reason, can't we? But on Twitter, Musk again pointed out the White House's willingness to ignore Tesla's role in promoting electric vehicles. Ford is investing $11 billion to build electric vehicles, creating 11,000 jobs across the country, read posts from Biden Twitter account as the State of the Union speech concluded. GM is making the largest investment in its history, $7 billion to build electric vehicles, creating 4,000 jobs in Michigan. Tesla has created over 50,000 US jobs building electric vehicles and is investing more than double GM and Ford combined. The billionaire entrepreneur responded as a FYI to person controlling this Twitter. Tesla has created over 50,000 US jobs, electric vehicles, and investing more than double GM and Ford combined, like I just read. Last month, Musk also took to Twitter and issued commentary on the federal budget deficit, responding to a headline from the Babylon Bee. Biden goes double or nothing on national debt by placing $30 trillion. Let's see what else he's got to say here. $30 billion. Where the hell is it? Oh. Biden goes double or nothing on the national debt by placing holy fuck. $30 trillion? Musk pointed out the financial implications of the debt are no laughing matter. It's no laughing matter, but now our dollar... Well, it's kind of funny. I started collecting Bitcoin and cryptocurrency 2015, 2016 era. And it's funny because people kept telling me, a lot of old timers, mentors of mine, they kept saying, it's fake, it's going to go to zero, it's fake, it's fake, it's fake. It's like, well, what do you think they've just done by printing all that money, not backed by anything but legal tender? Which means not backed by anything except with as much of it is in circulation. I don't know if I said that right or not. Hopefully I got the point across. The true national debt, including unfunded entitlements, is at least $60 trillion, roughly 3 times the size of the U.S. economy. Can you imagine? Something has got to give. Indeed, Musk has pointed to the national debt while arguing that Congress should avoid greenlighting Biden's domestic spending plans. I would say that this bill, don't pass it. That's my recommendation. Musk said of the $1.75 trillion Build Back Better Act. And let's look at this. Build Back Better 666. Look. Now we see what they're really after, isn't it? Musk added to his remarks by sharing an analysis from the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School, his alma mater, explaining that the national debt would increase by over 24% if this bill's provisions are made permanent. See what that sounds like. Musk added to his remarks by sharing an analysis from the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School, his alma mater, explaining that the national debt would increase by over 24% if this bill's provisions are made permanent. See what that sounds like. Check. Sounds like shit is what it sounds like. So in recent days, Musk has received commendation for helping Ukrainians amid the Russian invasion. Under the leadership of Musk, SpaceX answered a request from Ukrainian Vice President Minister Mikhailo Fedorov, I'm sure I fucked that up, to supply broadband internet service through the company's Starlink satellites. Has received commendation for helping Ukrainians amid the Russian invasion. Under the leadership of Musk, SpaceX answered a request from Ukrainian Vice President Minister Mikhailo Fedorov, I'm sure I fucked that up, to supply broadband internet service through the company's Starlink. According to the SpaceX, Starlink is ideally suited for areas where connectivity has been unreliable or completely unavailable, and people across the globe are using Starlink to gain access to education, health services, and even communication support during natural disasters. The Daily Wire is one of America's fastest-growing conservative media companies and countercultural outlets for news, opinion, and entertainment. $30 trillion fucking dollars. I think when Obama finally left, I think the debt was around 20 trillion. So Nancy Pelosi's bizarre response during Biden remarks, she's fucked. She's like a demon in human skin, I think. But, so response during Biden remarks on burn pits baffles social media. People are talking about during the Biden speech, reacted with a strange rub of her hands and smiled at Biden talking about the dangers of our troops face. She looked like she just stole candy from a baby erection. Her reactions ought to be on a highlight reel. I know, she's a fucking weirdo. What does that mean? Look at it. Look. What the fuck? What is she doing? Don't do that. Freaking everybody out. The moment Nancy Pelosi acts way too happy and then realizes she was acting too happy and started chewing her face off. Democrats are politicizing the coronavirus and forget the whole world is watching. Speaker Pelosi, House Speaker. She's like, oh, her dentures almost fell out. Fuck, she's weird. It's too bad good people don't really want to rule anything. So, President of Ukraine Zelensky assassination plot foiled, Ukrainian authorities say. Ukrainian National Security and Defense Council Chief Alysky Danilov announced during a briefing Tuesday that Ukrainian forces had foiled an assassination plot against President Zelensky, according to a telegram post from Ukrainian authorities. Zelensky has said since the start of Russia's unprovoked invasion of the Ukraine that he would be a prime target for assassination. Well, Putin wants a government in there that he can kind of tell what to do, right? He doesn't want to have an ally on his own doorstep. See, I think this is a provocation from instances from the Second World War. Because Russia didn't really mobilize until after Germany had invaded them. So I think Putin's probably thinking, so what are we supposed to do? Just wait, and then the West will eventually just invade Russia? The big picture, according to Telegram message, Danilov said that the unit of elite Chechen special forces known as the Kadrovites had been behind the plot and had subsequently been eliminated. We are well aware of the special operation that was to take place directly by the Kadrovites to eliminate our president. Ukrainian authorities had tipped off about the plot by members of Russia's Federal Security Service who do not support the war, he added. Danilov elaborated that the Kadrovite group had been divided into two, with one being destroyed in Gostomel and the other under fire. Of course, we don't really know what the truth is. All we know is that the media is one-sided and with Ukraine. Not that we shouldn't be, but it is a bit strange. But Newt Gingrich, Biden's State of the Union remarks really frightening. Well, I watched the whole thing. It seemed to be okay. I just know he's lying. Well, let's take a look what he has to say here.
Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, also a Fox News contributor. Nice to see you here in our nation's capital.
It's good to see you in person.
The city that time forgot. I used to say that about New York until I came back to Washington, D.C. But the mandates are gone now. That's a good thing. How are we situated right now? How's our strategy?
Well, we don't have a strategy. I think you have a president who, I thought it was really frightening after I watched the whole thing and thought about it for a while, because either he knows he's lying, and so he goes and gives a speech the whole world's watching in the middle of a war, but he gives it anyway knowing it's a lie, or he doesn't know he's lying, which may be even more frightening. He may believe this stuff. I mean, the thing you just said, you know, he's releasing 1.5 days oil supply for the United States, 1.5 days. And the world market's very sophisticated, so the price went up because they said, well, that's not a strategy. He told us if you could afford to buy an electric car, you can save $80 a month at the gas station.
Right.
Now, the average person out there trying to get to work, paying, Clifton and I were in Los Angeles last week, and it was like, we saw one place that was $6.60 for
Wow.
premium. You know, that person driving a used car trying to get to work is not going to feel helped that if only they could buy an electric car, which, by the way, uses electricity, which California doesn't have enough of.
Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, also a Fox News contributor.
Well, he brings up a good point, doesn't he? He said it right there that they want to start building electric cars where California doesn't have enough electricity. So how's that supposed to work? But former House Speaker Newt Gingrich reacted Wednesday to President Biden's State of the Union address. During a Wednesday appearance on America's Newsroom, Gingrich said Biden announcing the release of 30 million barrels of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve will do nothing to bring down the gas. Well, no shit. Newt Gingrich, we don't have a strategy. I thought it was really frightening after I watched the whole State of the Union. I thought about it for a while because either he knows he's lying, and I'm just reading what he basically said. I wasn't really a huge fan of Newt Gingrich when Ron Paul was running for president, because he seemed like a neocon of sorts, but I mean, he seemed pretty sharp. One of the sharper Republicans I've seen. The State of the Union, Biden calls to Biden calls to secure border amid historic crisis. President Biden, during his State of the Union address, called to secure the border amid the historic crisis that has surged under his watch. He told them to come. See if I can find it. Where is it? It's got to be still here. Okay, don't come. What's he saying here? Let's look at this.
More than 3 million Americans. My question to you is, if an individual is living in the United States of America without documents, and that is his only offense, should that person be deported?
No. Depending if they committed a major crime, they should be deported. And the president was left in his, President Obama, I think, did a heck of a job. To compare him to what this guy's doing is absolutely, I find, close to immoral. But the fact is that, look, we should not be locking people up. We should be making sure we change the circumstance, as we did, why they would leave in the first place. And those who come seeking asylum, we should immediately have the capacity to absorb them, keep them safe until they can be heard.
A 15-second, if you could, if you wish to answer. Should someone who is here without documents, and that is his only offense, should that person be deported?
That person should not be the focus of deportation.
So wait a minute. If someone come in and their only offense was being illegally in here, in the country, should they be deported? And Biden's like, no. Basically running around the question. It's like, that is an invading army, you fucking idiot. Well, I know he's not an idiot. He's being told what to do, like we all know this. Look at him. He's like, what? Where am I? But this is what the USA border actually looks like. Take a good fucking look.
This latest caravan passing through Mexico, now numbering in the thousands. These migrants, many from Honduras, Guatemala, Haiti, and El Salvador, stopping for rest, days after barreling through a blockade of Mexican police and National Guard. The migrants now, though, are still more than 1,100 miles away from the United States. They're facing a lack of essentials like water, but some worry about the dangers lurking from within. This man didn't want anyone to recognize him. He is accused of taking $1,500 from this woman, Cecilia Guzman. According to her, he assured her that he's been a human trafficker for over 25 years and was going to take her nephew to the U.S. Instead, he disappeared with the money. She says she saw him on TV walking with the caravan, and she went out to hunt him down.
Entonces se le dio a él $1,500 aquí en Tapachula y ya empezó a que lo iba a llevar, y entonces ya no lo llevó.
Guzman turning him into the police. But others say it's not only human smugglers they are afraid of, they too have to protect themselves from other migrants. This Honduran, Scarlett, said she was beaten up by multiple men because she's a lesbian.
Dice que yo soy hombre, que yo tengo que salir de ahí porque solo las mujeres se podían quedar, y sí soy mujer.
Others say they are escaping violence and discrimination in their home countries, the same violence and discrimination that follows them on the caravan.
Salí pensando que estos países son libres y no es así.
The destination still months away. But despite the turmoil from within, this caravan is continuing on.
All right, Vaughn joins us now live in studio. So, Vaughn, we've been tracking this caravan. The U.S., they're eventually going to reach the border. Do they know that this caravan is moving north?
Right. The U.S. administration is aware that caravans like this are moving north here. And when you're talking about the U.S. response, right, they've urged Mexico to do more to stem the flow of these caravans. That's what you saw in those last videos there of Mexican police and the National Guard trying to form a blockade to keep them from moving northward. But when you're talking about thousands of individuals, that's not going to stop them. So when you're talking about 1,100 more miles, they do reach the U.S. border, let's assume that, then you're dealing with Title 42, which the Biden administration has continued to use. That it's a public health law they're using during this pandemic to justify turning away those asylum seekers like we saw last month with those Haitians there. You still, out of the 1.7 million individuals that have shown up at the U.S. border this last year, a majority of them, nearly 2/3 of them, have been removed.
Real quick, when do they estimate this group will reach the border?
It could take more likely weeks, but potentially even months.
Okay. Vaughn Hillard, we appreciate your reporting. Thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking.
Well, you've seen the hordes of people. It's like, I don't really know what to say. Like, what can you say? But just getting back to this. So he calls to secure the borders, yet it's a fucking disaster. As far as I could tell, the immigration system's busted up, and ICE is smally busted up as well. There's never been this many illegal crossings. That's the funny thing, is that the U.S. can't even take care of its own border. How the hell does the U.S. have the audacity to tell anybody what they should be doing? But we need to secure the border and fix the immigration system, Biden said. But I mean, every neocon or neo-lib for the last 30 years have been saying that shit. Let's see if we can find the other ones here. Obama, Tux, border.
This is Neo, the new way to spend and save. Paying with Neo means real cash back at the places you love, while helping our neighborhoods thrive. And this is only the beginning. Join Neo and see for yourself.
There is bipartisan hope of getting it done. This year, the Senate passed an immigration reform bill by a wide bipartisan majority, and it addresses the key issues that need to be addressed. It would strengthen our borders. It would level the playing field by holding employers accountable if they knowingly hire undocumented workers. It would modernize our legal immigration system so that we eliminate the backlog of family visas and make it easier to attract highly skilled entrepreneurs from beyond our borders. It would make sure that everybody plays by the same rules by providing a pathway to earn citizenship for those who are living in the shadows. A path that includes passing a background check and learning English and paying taxes and a penalty and getting in line behind everyone trying to come here the right way. And each of these pieces would go a long way towards fixing our broken immigration system. Each of them has been supported by Democrats and Republicans in the past. There's no reason we can't come together and get it done. And what's more, we know the immigration reform that we're proposing would boost our economy and shrink our deficits. Independent economists have said that if the Senate bill became law over the next 2 decades, our economy would grow by $1.4 trillion more, and it would reduce our deficits by $850 billion more. And you don't have to be an economist to figure out that workers will be more productive if they've got their families here with them. They're not worried about deportation. They're not living halfway around the world. This isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. Right now, it's up to Republicans in the House to decide if we can move forward as a country on this bill. If they don't want to see it happen, they've got to explain why. The good news is, just this past week, Speaker Boehner said that he is hopeful we can make progress on immigration reform. And that is good news. I believe the Speaker is sincere. I think he genuinely wants to get it done. And that's something we should be thankful for this week. And I think there are a number of other House Republicans who also want to get there.
Cunning. They talk nice, but in reality, it's the opposite of that, isn't it? Same with Trudeau. I think the thing that bothers me the most is the public's really sidelined by someone who can talk nice, and it seems like it's all nice and all good and all this. But in reality, it isn't. And then when you come to Trump talking about immigration, he gives you a straightforward thing on what the hell's going on, if he's still even on here. Let's see.
Nearly 180,000
and this is the reality of it, right?
Illegal immigrants.
This is what the other guys won't say,
records,
but this is the actual reality of
deported
it.
from our country are tonight roaming free, and 80,000 illegal immigrants with criminal records ordered deported from our country are tonight roaming free to threaten peaceful citizens. The number of new illegal immigrant families who have crossed the border so far this year already exceeds the entire total from 2015. They are being released by the tens of thousands into our communities with no regard for the impact on public safety or resources. One such border crosser was released and made his way to Nebraska. There, he ended the life of an innocent young girl named Sarah Root. She was 21 years old and was killed the day after graduating from college with a 4.0 grade point average, #1 in her class. Her killer was then released a second time, and he is now a fugitive from the law. I've met Sarah's beautiful family, but to this administration, their amazing daughter was just one more American life that wasn't worth protecting. No more.
And that's the reality of it. They want to talk all nice. Let's see what the other one's got to say. George Bush, immigration. So, said the same fucking thing, look.
States in the internet world. I do believe there will be a rational immigration policy eventually passed. I think there's going to have to be some time. What's interesting about our country, if you study history, is that there are some isms that occasionally pop up. One is isolationism, and its evil twin protectionism, and its evil triplet nativism. So if you study the 20s, for example, there was an American First policy that said, who cares what happens in Europe? Well, what happened in Europe mattered eventually because of World War II. There was Smoot-Hawley, which was a part of an economic policy, which basically said we don't want trade. In other words, let's throw up barriers. And there was an immigration policy that I think during this period argued we had too many Jews and too many Italians, therefore we should have no immigrants. And my point to you is we've been through this kind of period of isolationism, protectionism, nativism. I'm a little concerned that we may be going through the same period.
So you see it. They all say the exact same thing except Trump. Trump's the only one in the last 30 fucking years that hasn't said the same thing. Let's look at Bill Clinton. Immigration. So they say the same thing. Reform. We'll get reform passed. Maybe we'll get it passed. Whatever. Let's take a look here.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more, by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before, by cracking down on illegal hiring, by barring welfare benefits to illegal aliens. In the budget I will present to you, we will try to do more to speed the deportation of illegal aliens who are arrested for crimes, to better identify illegal aliens in the workplace, as recommended by the commission headed by former Congresswoman Barbara Jordan. We are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws. It is wrong and ultimately self-defeating for a nation of immigrants to permit the kind of abuse of our immigration laws we have seen in recent years, and we must do more to stop it.
See, that's funny. That's coming from the left, and that is in year 1995. Did you hear what he said? That's far more stern and considered right-wing than Trump ever was. Listen.
Of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws. It is wrong and ultimately self-defeating for a nation of immigrants to permit the kind of abuse of our immigration laws we have seen in recent years, and we must do more to stop it.
All right. So we see how this works. It's a complete sham. They say the exact same fucking thing over and over, but never actually do anything. It's the perfect scam, though, isn't it? It really is. See what Reagan has to say about it. Debate on immigration.
Does Canada's Garage carry top brands like Fram and Castrol? Trust Canada's Garage for brakes, tires, and everything in between.
Yes, my name is David Grossberg, and I'd like to know, do you think the children of illegal aliens should be allowed to attend Texas public schools free, or do you think that their parents should pay for their education?
Who are you addressing that to?
I think you're first in this.
He was looking right at you. I said he was. Look, I'd like to see something done about the illegal alien problem that would be so sensitive and so understanding about labor needs and human needs that that problem wouldn't come up. But today, if those people are here, I would reluctantly say I think they would get whatever it is that they're, what the society is giving to their neighbors. But the problem has to be solved. The problem has to be solved because as we have kind of made illegal some kinds of labor that I'd like to see legal, we're doing two things. We're creating a whole society of really honorable, decent, family-loving people that are in violation of the law, and secondly, we're exacerbating relations with Mexico. The answer to your question is much more fundamental than whether they attend Houston schools, it seems to me. I don't want to see if they're living here, I don't want to see a whole thing of 6- and 8-year-old kids being made, one totally uneducated and made to feel that they're living with outside the law. Let's address ourselves to the fundamentals. These are good people, strong people. Part of my family is a Mexican.
Can I add to that? I think the time has come that the United States and our neighbors, particularly our neighbor to the south, should have a better understanding and a better relationship than we've ever had. And I think that we haven't been sensitive enough to our size and our power. They have a problem of 40 to 50% unemployment. Now, this cannot continue without the possibility arising with regard to that other country that we talked about, of Cuba and what it is stirring up, of the possibility of trouble below the border, and we could have a very hostile and strange neighbor on our border. Rather than making them or talking about putting up a fence, why don't we work out some recognition of our mutual problems, make it possible for them to come here legally with a work permit, and then while they're working and earning here, they pay taxes here. And when they want to go back, they can go back, and they can cross and open the border both ways by understanding their problems. This is the only safety valve right now they have with that unemployment that probably keeps the lid from blowing off down there. And I think we could have a fine relationship, and it would solve the problem you mentioned also.
It's actually pretty interesting. Republican candidates talking like that. Bill Clinton had a more stern tone against immigrants than the Republicans did in the 80s. In 1994, Bill Clinton had a sterner tone. That's fascinating. But we're going to keep moving on here. Progressive rage over Biden's speech called to fund the police. President Joe Biden departed from far-left Democrats during the State of the Union address on Tuesday when he dismissed the defund the police movement. Proven strategies like community violence interruption, trusted messengers, working the cycle of violence and trauma, and give young people hope, he said. We should all agree the answer is not to defund the police, it is to fund the police, to fund them. The president also recalled the funerals of NYPD officers Mora and Rivera, who were killed. I know it's not funny, but I have no idea. Who were killed when responding to a 911 call. I spoke with their families and I told them we are forever in debt for their sacrifices, and we will carry on their mission to restore the trust and safety every community deserves, he said. Conservatives cheered on the pro-law enforcement rhetoric, while progressives were less enthusiastic. Listen to Biden declare, the answer is not to defund the police, it's to fund the police. Well, let's take a look at the cities, and they can tell us what the answer is. We'll just go like this. So, when did that occur? Right? 2020. So all we'd have to do is look at rates of 2021 to see what happened. Okay, well, let's take a look at this. I'm not necessarily combing through the information to get the right answer. I just typed in a simple heading. Across the U.S. are breaking all-time homicides this year, and that's coming from, you know, murders are up, crime is not. Yeah, well, that doesn't make much sense, but okay. And then how can we forget the looting, right? Looting. USA. The funny thing is that these look the same, isn't it? Look at this. Look at that. You could say that this is South Africa.
Getting this far hasn't been easy. That's why we spent generations testing limits.
Tonight, a derailment of 17 train cars in Los Angeles Saturday, leaving crews to clean up the mess. The cause under investigation. The accident happened near the same section of tracks where thousands of empty boxes were left behind by cargo thieves. The ground still strewn with filament. Cameras caught several people sorting through packages and stealing their contents.
We have really faced an unprecedented situation here in Los Angeles County in particular, where we have had about 160% increase in railroad theft that we have never
160%.
Encountered before.
A statement from Union Pacific on Sunday said the company has, quote, increased the number of special agents, drones, specialized fencing, and trespass detection systems. Union Pacific's agents have made hundreds of arrests, but less than half are booked, and of those, most are released in less than 24 hours. The company now asking the LA County District Attorney's Office for help in prosecuting thieves, saying the lack of consequences prevent Union Pacific from safely moving goods. In November, our NBC Los Angeles crews filmed people on the tracks. One hopped on a slow-moving train carrying what appeared to be bolt cutters.
Cargo thieves and organized cargo theft groups is that they will target commodities that they know that they can sell. So they're going to hone in on those commodities that are either high in demand or shortage and harder for people to get. That way they can get a better return on the sale of it after they steal it.
Union Pacific now considering changing rail operations, like avoiding LA County in the future if the level of cargo thefts continues to rise.
All right, Gotti Schwartz joins us now from Los Angeles.
So, after seeing that, it's pretty clear what's going on there. If you want to defund the police, that's the result. Cities will just burn to the ground. Not maybe in a literal sense, but from a economical sense, no company worth their salt would be willing to put up with that long term, nor could they afford it. Unless it's all insurance. The answer definitely ain't to fund the police. This is the people in power. It's not like I'm the best speaker and use the best words and all this, but you can do a little better, I think. The answer definitely ain't to fund the police. Fund the police is not the answer. Well, let's see. From Breitbart. Conservatives cheered on the pro-law enforcement rhetoric while progressives were less enthusiastic. Fund the police is not the answer. They are already well-funded and not accountable to anyone, and their presence hasn't led the community safety. Well, defunding it hasn't either then. I mean, if they're not doing their job now with the current funding, so how are they supposed to do their job later with less money? You know what I mean? It doesn't really make any sense. It's like hiring me to do a job and then taking away half of what I quoted you and telling me to do the same job. Obviously, I'm just going to leave, right? I'll say, fuck you, I'm out of here. But this guy's saying we don't need to defund the police. Oh, he's just... Okay, we don't need to defund the police. We need to fund them with resources and training. What frickin' bullocks. But it's what whites want to hear. It's funny how black people can just fire from the hip. Just fucking spew garbage right out of their face. No repercussions. Not that they're supposed to be. That's what freedom of speech is. But you can't actually... You know, they're seemingly the most protected class. Lefty Twitter is not happy with the fund the police. I felt for a minute that I was listening to 45. Fund the police? No, Joe. Fund our damn schools. Give our people free healthcare. What was that? Did you know that American schools are the most funded schools on earth, and the inner city schools do the worst? And they're heavily funded. Check this out. So New York schools spend the most. California spends the most on post-secondary education. New York also spends second most on K-12 education in terms of percentage of local taxpayer income. Baltimore is in the top 50 largest school systems in the country. The system has nearly 80,000 students, roughly 10,000 employees, and a $1.18 billion budget, largely funded by the state. That is a lot of money. That's a funny thing. Give them more money. Why? You're just gonna fucking piss it away, and then basically gonna piss it away, and what's left will have to get investigated, and then there'll be a slap in the wrist for lining your pockets with money and buying crap. Corruption. See what Lindsey Graham's saying. Moving on. With all due respect to President Biden, we are not going to be okay unless we adjust our policies. Well, this coming from a neocon tries to say it nicely, but...
Tonight, I can announce the United States has worked with 30 other countries to release 60 million barrels of oil from reserves around the world. America will lead that effort, releasing 30 million barrels of our own strategic petroleum reserve. And we stand ready to do more if necessary, united with our allies. These steps will help blunt gas prices here at home, but I know news about what's happening can seem alarming to all Americans. But I want you to know we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. When the history of this era is written, Putin's war in Ukraine will have left Russia weaker and the rest of the world stronger.
Yeah, well, it sounds nice, doesn't it? But being nice never fucking made anybody win. That's the funny thing. The only thing that makes people win is character. Character only comes through resistance, struggle, and grinding. By being nice all the time, number one, you get away with not doing anything. Just by being nice, funny enough. Lindsey Graham, well, you're not wrong. So Piers Morgan said world leaders scared of fighting back against Putin. Well, if you have a guy that's willing to nuke the earth for his own personal reasons, because he feels like he's on the defense, then hell yeah, we're all afraid, as we should be. Veteran broadcasters Piers Morgan sent out a message against world leaders, including President Biden, saying they failed to stand up to Russian President Vladimir Putin. On Thursday, Russian forces invaded Ukraine, one of the largest military attacks against European states since World War II. The attack continued throughout the weekend with no clear signs of stopping. Since then, many leaders, including President Biden, have been criticized for appearing to offer little resistance or solutions for Ukraine. We know Putin's convoy is about to reach Kiev, start murdering many more women and children. We also know we can stop it with airstrikes, entirely justified by his war crimes, but we won't because we're scared of retaliation. Yeah, well, you should be, because that is some freaky shit. Let's take a look at some of the war stuff here. Remarkable and saddening image from Russia as riot police bundle away babushka protesting against nuclear war. Yeah, it sucks, doesn't it? Imagine being a cop having to do that. UN General Assembly approves resolution. Yeah, well, who even listens to the UN anyway? Are you from Russia? We refuse to bunker you or sell you fuel. Ukraine. Yes, from Russia.
Экипаж России, да? Ребята, мы отказываемся от бункеровки, мы отказываемся снабжать ваш пароход.
Кто с нами говорит?
С вами говорит старший помощник капитана с Грузии. Your dialect, it looks like the Russian. Are you from Russia?
Yes, from Russia. Russian remember.
Ясно, экипаж России, да? Ребята, мы отказываемся от бункеровки, мы отказываемся снабжать ваш пароход.
Кто с нами говорит?
С вами говорит старший помощник капитана с Грузии. Мы не будем снабжать ваш пароход. Русский корабль, иди нахуй. Оккупанты, бля.
Уважаемые, давайте без политики, у нас топливо заканчивается.
Ну, если у вас топливо заканчивается, вы можете использовать
Весла, пошли вы нахуй.
Слава героям, слава Украине, героям слава. Your dialect, it looks like the Russian.
Yeah. It's pretty fucked up that the people got to pay the price, right? So Russia, I mean, obviously, we don't really know how much of this is true. That's why I kind of dwell on the video footage, because even that can be faked by something like this. Obviously, it seems authentic to me. But Russia's wealthiest billionaires have lost a combined of $83 billion on paper. I don't think Putin would have done this if he cared what the repercussions were. I mean, let's be real. This war is now moving to space satellites. This is where we, rest of the world, all sit down because we don't have these. Anyone who dares attempt to touch our satellites, they'll be inviting a war. Russia. That's crazy. St. Petersburg, Russia. People gathered to protest against war. Protests gathered at Dvor Square chanting no more war. First arrests were made. It sucks because ethnically and culturally it's the same people, essentially. It's like going to war with your cousin. What is that? Oh, I see. It says Ukrainian soldier with captured Russian one. He's thinking, fuck my life. That's crazy. They took RT down. Russia TV has been switched off by whom for what? Are we now an American satellite state? SA is not a war crime with Russia. RT must be switched back on now. Yeah, because the U.S. wants to push its own propaganda, right? The UN. I don't think anyone even listens to the UN, do they? This is interesting. See, this is where it comes down to reality. Is that this entire plan has obviously been known by smarter men than, than us.
Therefore raise the danger of war. And I think it's if we move the forces, NATO forces, including American troops, toward Russia's borders, where will we be then? I mean, it's obviously going to militarize the situation.
That's crazy.
And therefore raise the danger of war. And I think it's important to emphasize, though I regret saying this, Russia will not back off. This is existential. Too much has happened. Putin, and it's not just Putin. We seem to think Putin runs the whole of the universe. He has a political class. That political class has opinions. Public support is running overwhelmingly in favor of Russian policy. Putin will compromise at these negotiations, but he will not back off if confronted militarily. He will.
Wow, that's fascinating.
If we move the forces,
2014.
NATO forces.
That's what I mean. We got to take a look at this here. Let's watch the whole speech, maybe.
We are not at the beginning of the Cold War, a new one. We are well into it, which alerts us to the fact, just watching what you showed up there, that hot war is imaginable now. For the first time in my lifetime, my adult lifetime since the Cuban Missile Crisis, hot war with Russia. It's unlikely, but it's conceivable. And if it's conceivable, something has to be done about it. You did two things on your introduction which were very important. Almost alone among American media, you actually allowed Putin to speak for himself. He's being filtered through the interpretation of the mass media. Here, allegedly, what he said, and it's not representative. The second thing is, let us look just what's happening at this moment, or at least yesterday. The political head of NATO just announced a major escalation of NATO forces in Europe. He did a Churchillian riff. We will increase our power in the air and the sea, on the land. Meanwhile, as negotiations today began in Geneva, we're demanding that Russians de-escalate. And yet we, NATO, are escalating as these negotiations begin. So if you were to say what is going on in Ukraine today, and unfortunately, the focus is entirely on eastern Ukraine. We don't have any Western media in eastern Ukraine. We don't have any Western media in Western Ukraine, the other half of the country. We're not clear what's going on there. But clearly, things are getting worse and worse. Each side has a story that totally conflicts with the other side's story. There seems to be no middle ground. And if there's no middle ground in the public discourse, in the Russian media or the American media, it's not clear what middle ground they can find in these negotiations, though personally I think, and people will say, oh, Cohen's a Putin apologist, but it seemed to me that the proposals the Russians made a month ago for resolving the conflict are at least a good starting point, but it's not clear the United States is going to accept them.
Well, Steve Cohen, it was just a few weeks ago when we had you on as the crisis was beginning to unfold in Ukraine, and a lot of what you said then turned out to be true, which was that you feared that there would be a split in Ukraine itself between the East and West, and obviously Crimea was just developing then. But it seems that all of the emphasis in the coverage here is as if the crisis started with Russian aggression, not with the earlier period of what was NATO and Europe's involvement in Ukraine before the deposing of the elected president.
Well, I think you've emphasized the absolute flaw in at least the American, because I don't follow European press very closely, the American media and political narrative. As a historian, I would say that this conflict began 300 years ago, but we can't do that. As a contemporary observer, it certainly began in November 2013 when the European Union issued an ultimatum, really, to the then elected president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, that sign an agreement with us, but you can't have one with Russia too. In my mind, that precipitated this crisis. Because why give a country that has been profoundly divided for centuries, and certainly in recent decades, an ultimatum, an elected president, choose and divide your country further? So when we say today, Putin initiated this chaos, this danger of war, this confrontation, the answer is no. That narrative is wrong from the beginning. It was triggered by the European Union's unwise ultimatum. Now flash forward to just 1 month ago, about the time I was with you before. Remember that the European foreign ministers, 3 of them, I think, went to Kiev and negotiated with Yanukovych, who was still the president, an agreement. Now, the Russians were present at the negotiation, but they didn't sign it. But they signed off on it. They said, okay. What did that agreement call for? Yanukovych would remain president until December. Not May, when elections are now scheduled, but December of this year. Then there would be a presidential election. He could run in them or not. Meanwhile, there would be a kind of government of national accord trying to pull the government together. And importantly, Russia would chip in trying to save the Ukrainian economy. But there would also be parliamentary elections. That made a lot of sense, and it lasted 6 hours. The next day, the street, which was now a mob. It was no longer peaceful protesters, as it had been in November. It had now become something else, controlled by very ultra-nationalist forces, overthrew Yanukovych, who fled to Russia, burned up the agreement. So who initiated the next stage of the crisis? It wasn't Russia. They wanted that agreement of February, a month ago, to hold, and they're still saying, why don't we go back to it? You can't go back to it. Though there is a report this morning that Yanukovych, who is in exile in Russia, may fly to eastern Ukraine today or tomorrow, which will be a whole new dimension. But the point of it is that Putin didn't want, and this is reality, this is not pro-Putin or pro-Washington, this is just a fact. Putin did not want this crisis, he didn't initiate it. But with Putin, once you get something like that, you get Mr. Pushback, and that's what you're now seeing. And the reality is, as even the Americans admit, he holds all the good options, we have none. That's not good policymaking, is it?
Let's turn to President Obama. Thursday, he was interviewed by CBS News by Major Garrett.
Is Vladimir Putin provoking a civil war there? And will you and Western leaders let him get away with that?
I think that what is absolutely clear is not only have Russians gone into Crimea and annexed it in illegal fashion, violating the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, but what they've also done is supported, at minimum, non-state militias in southern and eastern Ukraine, and we've seen some of the activity that's been taking place there.
He left out one thing that he said, which I consider to be unwise and possibly reckless. He went on to say that Russia wouldn't go to war with us because our conventional weapons are superior. That is an exceedingly provocative thing to say, and he seems to be unaware, President Obama, that Russian military doctrine says that when confronted by overwhelming conventional forces, we can use nuclear weapons. They mean tactical nuclear weapons. I don't think any informed president, his handlers, would have permitted him to make such a statement. In fact, depending on how far you want to take this conversation about the Obama administration, I don't recall in my lifetime, in confrontations with Russia, an administration, I speak now of the President and his Secretary of State, who seem in their public statements to be so misinformed, even uninformed, both about Ukraine and Russia. For example, when Kerry testified last week to Congress that all the unrest in Ukraine was due to Putin's meddling and his provocations, he denied the underlying problem, which is divided Ukraine. I mean, everybody knows that history, God, whoever's responsible for our destiny, created a Ukraine that may have had one state but wasn't one country. It may be 2, it may be 3 countries. But for Kerry to say that all this conflict in Ukraine is due to Putin simply makes a resolution of the problem by denying the problem. Or let me ask you a question. What in the world was the director of the American CIA doing last Sunday in Kiev? It is mind-boggling that it was called a secret mission when my grandson knows that the Ukrainian intelligence services are full of pro-Russian officers. And yet they send the head of the CIA at this crucial, inflamed moment thereby to Kiev, thereby reinforcing the Russian narrative that everything that's happening in Ukraine is an American provocation. What are they thinking?
Well, aside from having a very educated grandson, I just want to turn to NATO for a moment.
I'm toting that.
NATO announced a series of steps to reinforce its forces. This is NATO in Eastern Europe because of the Ukraine crisis. NATO's top military commander, Philip Breedlove, described the moves as defensive measures.
All the actions that we have proposed and have been accepted today are clearly defensive in nature, and I think it's going to be very straightforward to see them as defensive in nature. They are designed to assure our allies, and so I think that in any case, it's always a chance that you run that something might be misinterpreted, but we specifically designed these measures to assure our allies only and to be clearly seen as defensive in nature.
Your response, Professor Cohen.
I've never known what purely defensive weapons have meant. I mean, presumably they are guns that shoot in only one direction. I mean, it's going to have no effect. I mean, they're talking about giving the Ukrainians maybe some small arms, some night vision stuff, some superior intelligence. They can't give them intelligence information because the Ukrainian intelligence services, as we know from the tapes we've had, the leaked tapes, and from the CIA secret mission, which was exposed to Ukraine, revealed. The real debate going on in NATO, the real debate, because this is a distraction, is what Rasmussen said in your earlier clip. He's the political head of NATO, that we're building up, as we talk, our forces in Eastern Europe. Now, understand what's going on here. When we took in, we, meaning the United States and NATO, all these countries in Eastern Europe into NATO, we agreed with the Russians we would not put forward military installations there. We built some infrastructure, airstrips, there's some barracks, stuff like that. But we didn't station troops that could march toward Russia there. Now what NATO is saying, it is time to do that. Now, Russia already felt encircled by NATO member states on its borders. The Baltics are on its borders. If we move the forces, NATO forces, including American troops, toward Russia's borders, where will we be then? I mean, it's obviously going to militarize the situation and therefore raise the danger of war. And I think it's
going to be fucking bad, is what it is. But that guy was right on the money, 100%. Right on the money. This famous Russian-American journalist Vladimir Posner in 2018, who says that NATO expansion to Ukraine is unacceptable to Russia, that there has to be compromise where Ukraine guaranteed will not become a member of NATO.
Difficult to imagine. But why did I ask for a map of the United States and Mexico? Well, the United States has a pretty large border with Mexico. Now imagine that you have a revolution in Mexico. That's not that hard to imagine. And imagine that the government that comes to power is not a big fan of the United States of America. And I think that, too, is not difficult to imagine. But since it's a little bit afraid of Big Brother, it asks the Russians to send over 3 or 4 or 5 divisions to be placed on the U.S.-Mexican border. Think the U.S. would accept that? So why would the Russians accept this? That's what it's really all about. Does there have to be a compromise? In my opinion, yes. And the compromise has to be that Ukraine, guaranteed, will not become a member of NATO.
Interesting. So more recently, right before war, this is a couple days old, right before war broke out, this famous economist Jeffrey Sachs, writing a column in FT warning that NATO enlargement is utterly misguided and risky. True friends of Ukraine and a global peace should be calling for US and NATO compromise with Russia. Russia has long feared invasions from the West, whether by Napoleon, Hitler, or NATO. For this reason, cooler and wiser U.S. foreign policy strategists, including Bill Clinton Defense Secretary William Perry, the great statesman and diplomat George Kennan, and former ambassador to the Soviet Union, Jack Matlock, argued that NATO enlargement to the east after the demise of the USSR was unnecessary, reckless, and provocative. If war comes, Putin would of course deserve the blame in global ops. What is it? Barium. Russia's threats are thuggish and dangerous, yet as misguided as Russian actions are, American intransigence. What is it? Intransigence regarding NATO enlargement is utterly misguided and risky. True friends of Ukraine and a global peace should be calling for U.S. and NATO compromise with Russia, one that respects Russia's legitimate security interests while fully backing Ukraine's sovereignty. So none of this is new, obviously. To the thread. Bill Burns, 2008, Ukrainian entry into NATO is the brightest of all red lines for Russia, and I have yet to find anyone who views Ukraine and NATO as anything other than a direct challenge to Russian interests. Malcolm Fraser, 22nd Prime Minister of Australia, warned in 2014 that the move east by NATO is provocative, unwise, and very clear signal to Russia. He has this leads to a difficult and extraordinary dangerous problem. So none of this seems on accident, does it? None of it. How about that? Ukraine foreign minister is now asking China to mediate. China has real leverage on Russia, as it's their main connection to the global economy. This has potential to bring about a ceasefire. In any other war, there would be brokering on a ceasefire or peace, but not this time. It sends guns, rockets, munitions. Why is this happening? And don't blame Putin. This is global leaders stoking up the fight. I don't want to supply anyone. That's the other thing. I could have swore it was against international war laws not to send countries munitions, because that's a direct act of war, isn't it? So funny how this India ceasefire deal with Russia basically boiled down to them buying weapons from Russia. Africa as a whole buys more weapons from Russia, yet we believe we have no leverage. Nawaz Shah. I've depicted on the map the results of the UN vote on a ceasefire on the territory of Ukraine and the withdrawal of Russian troops from the territory of Ukraine. Looks impressive. Shit, I guess. Turkey's Erdogan calls for immediate Ukraine-Russia ceasefire, supports NATO enlargement. Switzerland is no longer neutral. You know you're wrong. Well, nobody wants war anymore, right? Well, I'm 37, and since I've been born, all I've known is war. People don't want that shit anymore. But I get why Russia did it. Sometimes we ceasefire and Ukrainians come up to from trench to spontaneous dance party. We're civilized peoples after all.
Я тащусь от колотушек. Чудо, чудо колотушек.
That was fucked. I thought they were talking about a ceasefire tomorrow. I mean, are they just going to leave the whole place overnight and then say, okay, we're done? Two powerful explosions in Kiev. Let's see here. Oh, it's going to be bad. When Turkey asked Russia not to send 3 warships to the Black Sea in recent days, Russia withdrew its request to do so, the country's top diplomat said. The move illustrated Turkey's delicate position, walking a fine line between Ukraine and Russia. Russia paratroopers have... That's what I mean. The only footage you have is just... Nah. Let's take a look where the moon is. Waxing or waning moon stage. New moon phase. So we're waxing. What the fuck? Huh. Well, you'd never see that in America. This whole fucking thing would be empty and not a dollar in there. Pro-Russian activists in Kiev, led by the extreme left leader Holsa, burned the EU flag. They're preparing to welcome the Russian army. Fuck, is that real? It's the same lies. Look, you can see the same dumbass in both pictures. Fucking liars. If anyone would like to use this picture that I took for Independence Statue, Independence Square, Kiev, then I'd be honored. My relatives in Kiev and Kharkiv, and Kharkiv, Ukraine sent me this traditional folk song. Oh, I can't take it. Unless she's a good singer. Nah, not my tempo. Yep. Yeah, I remember that. He called Ukraine. Well, he said he'll defend. Here, let's just look at it. I know he fucked it up, said Iran.
And he will never, never weaken the resolve of the free world. We stand with you. Putin may circle Kyiv with tanks, but he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people.
Iranian people, nice. I'm surprised that's all he screwed up in that whole speech. I watched almost the whole thing. It didn't seem that bad, but...
The problem that we're having is that because of the Premier Palace Hotel, I'm walking down to Krashatik, and I'm going to the supermarket to get some food. They've announced that it's okay to go to supermarkets and pharmacies. The problem that we're having is that because of the weapons that the Zelensky regime handed out willy-nilly in the last few days, a lot of criminals have these military-grade weapons, quite frankly. And so there's been robberies, there's been looting, there's been rapes, there's been all kinds of havoc because of these criminals. And it's known for a fact that a lot of the shooting that went on last night in Kiev had nothing to do with the Russians. The Russians were 10 kilometers or more away from these shootings, so it was clearly probably gang-related. Gangs settling scores and shooting one another.
That's crazy. I didn't even think of that. So the weapons that Zelensky gave out to the civilian population of Ukraine, now there's actual gangs and gang leaders that have weapon-grade military equipment, or military-grade weapons that they're using on each other and the public.
That's something that the Western media is not talking about, of how the Zelensky regime, by handing out weapons, has basically given weapons to all the criminal elements in the city. And the criminal elements in the city are, first of all, figuring out their dominance hierarchy and this anarchy that the government has created. And soon enough, once that's settled, they'll start targeting the civilians. That's what the Zelensky regime has done, okay? So let's not pretend otherwise. These people have they are creating chaos in Ukraine in the name of, the people fighting against the Russians. It's absurd, it's irresponsible, and it will only hurt the Ukrainian people. And I've come to the conclusion that the Zelensky regime is evil. And I live in Ukraine. I have Ukrainian family members. I think that the Ukrainian people are a brave, gentle, and wonderful people. But at this time, I think that the Zelensky regime has gone insane and should be...
Interesting. That looks like the same picture from days ago, so hard to say. Yeah, old picture. Shit. Well, what'd you expect? Fucking Russia has 150 million people. Hmm. Warning, graphic footage.
Сколько всего? Это наш. Где еще?
It's fucked up, isn't it? Yeah, well, they should do that in the States, shouldn't they? Fucking thieves are running rampant. Bunch of Chinese guy cosplaying as Russian soldiers. They showing Ukraine President Zelensky photo on their phone and yelling, "We're gonna capture him alive and zap his penis." What the fuck? Napoleon invaded Russia with 600,000 soldiers, only 30,000 made it back. Hitler attacks Russia with 3 million soldiers, shot himself to death as Russians entered Berlin. West asks Ukraine to fight on with Russians in Kiev. Big. Alright, well, I gotta get going. Thanks for watching, whoever.